May 12th, 1943. Off the coast of Bizerte, Tunisia, a cold morning wind sweeps across the deck of the U.S. transport ship USS Florence Nightingale. Steel groans under the weight of hundreds of German prisoners, sunburned, dust-stained survivors of the final battles in North Africa. Among them stands Gefreiter Lucas Weber, 23 years old, his hands trembling not from fear, but from exhaustion. For weeks he has fought under the burning African sun with the remnants of the 10th Panzer Division, slowly pushed into a shrinking pocket as Allied armor and artillery closed around them. Their last ammunition had been fired 2 days before surrender. Their last rations, if dry biscuits could be called that, were gone even earlier. Now Weber stares at the endless blue ahead, not knowing where this ship is taking him. He hears the clank of boots behind him. An American guard, wearing the distinctive M1 steel helmet, gestures toward the hatch. "Breakfast time, fellas, move along." The tone is surprisingly casual, almost friendly. Weber exchanges a look with Unteroffizier Franz Baumann, a veteran 15 years his senior. Baumann mutters under his breath, "Amerikaner spielen nur nett. Wart's ab, das wird nicht lange so bleiben." Americans only pretend to be nice. Just wait. It won't last. But there is no menace in the guard's voice, no rifle prodding his ribs. Just an orderly line forming on the deck as POWs descend into the ship's mess area. Inside, Weber stops dead in his tracks. The smell hits first. Warm, savory, impossible. Eggs, real eggs. He blinks, thinking his mind is playing tricks. For months in Africa, they had lived on half-spoiled canned meat, hard bread, and whatever they could scavenge. Yet here, in an American mess hall, metal trays slide across a counter where cooks in white aprons scoop scrambled eggs, oatmeal, and, impossibly, thick slices of soft bread. A German corporal behind him whispers, "Das ist unmöglich." This is impossible. An American sergeant overhears and grins. "Eat up. Plenty more where that came from." Plenty more? No ration cuts? No watery soup like the Wehrmacht field kitchens? It makes no sense. Weber forces himself forward, hands shaking as he takes his tray. The bread is warm. The eggs steam. The oatmeal is sweetened with something he can't place at first. Brown sugar. The room hums with disbelief. Men who had not smiled in months are smiling now, if only from shock. Baumann leans close and mutters, "Sie versuchen uns nur für irgendwas weich zu kochen." They're softening us up for something, but Weber doesn't answer. He can't. His first bite of bread nearly brings tears to his eyes. For the rest of that week aboard the Florence Nightingale, the Germans are fed 3 full meals a day. Real coffee, a luxury unheard of in wartime Germany since 1941, appears at every breakfast. Some POWs drink it too fast, burning their tongues, but refusing to wait. Weber savors each sip, tasting roasted bitterness he had forgotten even existed. When the ship finally docks in Norfolk, Virginia, the prisoners are marched down the gangway into bright midday sunlight. U.S. military police direct them into rows, check their names, and load them onto trains bound for POW camps scattered across the American heartland. As Weber settles into a wooden train seat, he stares out the window. The land passing by is lush, green, impossibly abundant. The farms alone look more prosperous than half the cities he left behind in Germany. Fields stretch for miles. Plows pulled by tractors churn dark soil. Silos rise like concrete towers. Nothing is bombed, nothing is burned. "Gott im Himmel," he whispers. Baumann scoffs at first, then falls silent. Even he cannot deny what he sees. Hours later, an American lieutenant addresses the car through the doorway. "Listen up, men. You're headed to a POW camp in the Midwest. You'll be treated according to the Geneva Convention. Food, lodging, medical care, the works. You'll do some labor, but nothing dangerous." A German soldier shouts from the back, "Und warum? Why are you treating us like guests?" The lieutenant pauses, choosing his words carefully. Because it's the right thing to do, and because we want the same treatment for our boys held in Europe. The answer stuns the prisoners into quiet. Back in Germany, Allied POWs are marched through snow in thin uniforms, starved, sometimes shot. That is the only framework they know for captivity. Reciprocity, morality, these are luxuries no one expects in war. The train rolls deeper into the continent. Evening settles over the plains. Fireflies flicker in the darkness as the cars rattle across wooden trestles. Weber presses his forehead to the cool glass and closes his eyes. For the first time since the Africa Corps collapse, he does not feel fear, only confusion, and an uncomfortable, unnerving thought. What if everything they had been told about America was wrong? May 18th, 1943, Camp Algona, Iowa. Dawn creeps over endless rows of pine-board barracks as the transport trucks roll through the front gate. The air is crisp, cool enough that Weber can see his breath. The sudden quiet of the Midwest countryside feels unreal after months of artillery and engine roar in Africa. Camp Algona doesn't look anything like the brutal prison camps German propaganda warned them about. No barbed wire killing zones, no guard towers bristling with machine guns. Instead, wide gravel paths stretch between neat wooden buildings. American MPs in khaki uniforms stand watch with rifles slung casually, not aimed. The truck jolts to a stop in front of the reception hall. The prisoners climb down, some limping, others stiff from the long ride. A fresh breeze carries a strange scent, the smell of something baked, something warm. Inside the hall, rows of long wooden tables fill the space. Overhead lights glow softly. At the far end, a line of American cooks ladle food onto metal trays. Steam rises in pale ribbons. Baumann sniffs the air, confused. Das riecht wie Kartoffelpüree? Smells like mashed potatoes? But it's not just potatoes. As the German column shuffles forward, Weber sees roast beef, green beans, and unbelievably white dinner rolls glistening with melted butter. Butter, a luxury ration nearly out of existence back home. A cook with rolled-up sleeves and a stained apron grins. "Welcome to Iowa, boys. Step right up." A few Germans glance nervously at the MPs, unsure if this is some trick. But the Americans don't bark orders. They don't shout. They don't shove. They simply gesture forward. When Weber reaches the counter, a cook plops a generous portion of meat onto his tray. "You want gravy on that?" Weber blinks. "Gravy?" The cook laughs. "That's a yes." Brown gravy floods his plate. Behind him, Baumann mutters, "Das ist Wahnsinn." This is madness. But Weber is barely listening. He sits at the nearest table, sets his tray down, and just stares. The food looks unreal. The smell alone feels like a dream. Around him, prisoners sit stiffly, unsure whether to eat or wait for instructions. Then cautiously they begin. Metal utensils scrape against trays. Someone lets out a choked laugh. Another curses under his breath in disbelief. Weber takes his first bite of the roast beef. His eyes close. It's tender, juicy, perfectly seasoned. He hasn't tasted anything like this since before Stalingrad, before Africa, before the long downward spiral of the war. Across the table, a German sergeant named Otto Keller stares at his roll, tearing it open to examine the soft interior. "Meine Frau hat seit 1944 kein solches Brot mehr gesehen." My wife hasn't seen bread like this since 1941. Weber swallows hard. The realization hits him with almost physical force. America doesn't just have food. America has abundance, even for prisoners. As they eat, a voice calls out from the doorway. A tall American officer, Captain William Hartley, the camp deputy commander, steps inside. "Gentlemen," he begins, speaking slowly, "you'll be assigned to barracks by company. After chow, you'll receive uniforms, medical checks, and camp orientation. You'll have work assignments starting tomorrow. Everything is run under the Geneva Convention." His tone is professional, not stern, not triumphant, just matter of fact. A soldier at the next table whispers, Sie behandeln uns besser als unsere eigenen Offiziere. They treat us better than our own officers. Weber doesn't respond. He's still chewing, still trying to wrap his mind around the simple miracle of a hot meal. After lunch, the Germans file out into the sunlight. Some look relieved, others look distrustful. All look bewildered. They are given clean denim work uniforms, soft towels, toothbrushes, even small bars of soap that smell faintly of mint and lavender. Red Cross parcels containing chocolate, cigarettes, canned milk, and writing paper sit stacked in wooden crates like gifts waiting to be opened. Weber holds the parcel in his hands, feeling its surprising weight. For a moment he forgets he is a prisoner. For a moment he feels human again. As evening settles over the camp, he sits on his bunk in Barracks 12, staring at the wooden ceiling. Men murmur quietly around him about food, about home, about this strange, gentle captivity. Baumann lies on the bunk below, arms crossed. I still don't trust it, he says. The Americans aren't stupid. They want something. Weber doesn't answer immediately. He gazes at the Red Cross chocolate bar on his table. The smell of roast beef still lingers in his mind. Finally, he whispers, almost to himself, or maybe this is simply how they live. Outside, beyond the wire, an American farm boy on a tractor rumbles past in the twilight, plowing a field so vast it seems to stretch forever. Weber watches from the window, and for the first time a quiet dread forms inside him. A realization that Germany may have underestimated a nation whose prisoners ate better than German soldiers on the front. May 27, 1943. Camp Algona, Iowa. A week passes, just long enough for the rhythms of camp life to settle into something resembling routine. The morning whistle blows at 06 hour, crisp and punctual. The barracks groan awake as German POWs pull on their denim uniforms, lace their boots, and assemble outside for roll call beneath the rising Midwestern sun. The air smells of dew-soaked grass and distant cornfields. Weber steps into formation, noticing how sharply the contrast hits him every morning. The silence, the peace, no air raid sirens, no Stukas, no mortar rounds, only birdsong drifting over the compound. Captain Hartley steps forward, clipboard in hand. Gentlemen, today's work assignments, half of Company C to the Northfields for corn detasseling. The rest, maintenance and carpentry, dismissed. The prisoners disperse, accompanied by a handful of relaxed MPs whose rifles remain slung casually, muzzles pointed safely at the ground. Even Baumann has stopped predicting disaster every hour. As Weber walks toward the tool shed, he notices something new. Trucks pulling up outside the main gate. American farm owners, older men in rolled-up shirt sleeves, step out, talking with camp staff and offering handshakes. Work details. Weber joins the group selected for farm labor. He climbs into the back of a flatbed truck beside Keller and two others. The engine sputters to life, carrying them down a dusty county road lined with red barns, grazing cattle, and endless green rows of crops. Unglaublich, Keller mutters. Sie leben in einem Paradies. This is unbelievable. They live in a paradise. The farmer who hired them, Harold Simmons, glances back over his shoulder. You boys ever detassel corn before? The Germans exchange blank looks. Simmons laughs. Don't worry, you'll learn. The truck pulls into a sprawling field where a wooden water tower casts a cool shadow. Weber jumps down and feels the rich soil under his boots. It's darker than any farmland he remembers from home. Deep, fertile, unscarred by war. Simmons hands the men gloves and begins demonstrating the motion. Just pull the tassel off each stalk. Easy work. But there's a lot of ground to cover. My farmhands volunteered for the draft, so you boys are my crew now. He's smiling, as if hiring prisoners is no stranger than hiring seasonal workers. The Germans begin. The air grows warm but not oppressive. A breeze sweeps across the field. Above them, hawks circle lazily in the wide Iowa sky. Hours pass. The work becomes rhythmic, meditative. Around noon, Simmons calls them back to the barn. Lunch is waiting. Thick ham sandwiches, fresh apples, and cold milk drawn straight from his own cattle. Baumann stares at his glass of milk as if it's a trap. Das ist frisch. This is fresh. Simmons wipes sweat from his brow. Of course it's fresh. You want more? Just say so. Weber drinks, the cold liquid shocking his throat. He hasn't had fresh milk since before the Eastern Front swallowed half the German dairy supply. As they eat, Simmons leans against the barn door. You know, boys, my son's in the 34th Infantry Division, fighting in Italy now. Tough campaign. The Germans freeze, unsure how to respond. Enemy, father, farmer. Simmons must sense their discomfort because he waves a hand lightly. I don't blame you for anything. War's war. You do your job. He does his. That's all. The simplicity of his words hits harder than any lecture. Back at the camp that evening, Weber returns to the mess hall. Tonight the menu is meatloaf, boiled potatoes, and canned peaches. Sweet, syrupy, decadent. He watches the line move, sees men laughing, sees guards chatting casually with prisoners. Something shifts inside him. As he sits at the table, he suddenly realizes what has been gnawing at him since the day they arrived. There is no hunger here. Not for the guards, not for the workers, not even for the prisoners. Food is not a strategic resource in America. It is not rationed into invisibility. It is not doled out with fear. It simply exists, abundant, inevitable, taken for granted by a nation that has never known invasion, blockade, or starvation. And that truth, more than any bomb or tank, terrifies him. Later that night, Weber steps outside into the cool air and watches fireflies blink like tiny lanterns across the compound. The sky stretches wide and calm above the horizon. Behind him, Baumann leans in the doorway, arms crossed. You look troubled, he says. Weber answers softly, Franz, if we fight a nation that treats its prisoners like this, feeds them like this, how can we ever hope to defeat them? Baumann doesn't reply. He doesn't need to. The silence between them says everything. For the first time, the Africa Corps veteran cannot muster cynicism. He simply stares into the distance, jaw set, as if finally acknowledging a truth he can't speak aloud. America was not the enemy Germany thought it was, and Germany was not the superpower its soldiers were raised to believe. June 10th, 1943, Camp Algona, Iowa. Rain patters softly on the tin roof of Barracks 12 as Weber folds his blanket with military precision. Today is mail day, one of the few moments every prisoner truly looks forward to. Outside, the yard fills with the murmured anticipation of hundreds of men waiting for their names to be called. A clerk from the U.S. Army Postal Service steps onto a wooden crate, shuffles through a stack of envelopes, and begins reading aloud. Hauptmann Krüger, Feldwebel Drescher, Gefreiter Lukas Weber. Weber freezes. Letters from home are rare. For some they have stopped completely. He steps forward, heart pounding, and accepts the envelope. His mother's handwriting covers the front, shaky but unmistakable. He retreats to a quiet corner of the barracks before breaking the seal with trembling fingers. Mein lieber Lukas. Her words spill across the page. Updates about his younger sister, news of shortages in Stuttgart, stories about neighbors trading shoes for potatoes, families boiling weeds to make soup. She mentions air raid warnings. She mentions fear. Then near the end, wir hungern, Lukas, aber halte durch. Bald wird alles vorbei sein. We are starving, Lukas. But hold on. Soon it will all be over. Weber closes his eyes. His mother is starving. Yet he, her son, a prisoner, ate meatloaf last night and canned peaches sweet enough to make his teeth ache. A wave of guilt washes over him so strongly it almost knocks the breath from his chest. Nearby, Keller sits cross-legged on his bunk, reading his own letter. Tears carve clean lines through the dust on his cheeks. Meine Frau schreibt, sie hat seit Wochen kein Fleisch gesehen. My wife writes, she hasn't seen meat in weeks. The contradiction is too much, too sharp, too cruel. At noon, the barracks gather in the recreation hall for Red Cross parcel distribution. Stacks of cardboard boxes fill the room, each stamped with the familiar red emblem. The Geneva Convention guarantees POW parcels. The Americans deliver them with clockwork reliability. Weber receives his box and carries it to a bench. Inside he finds a chocolate bar, a tin of evaporated milk, cigarettes, cheese spread, a small can of Spam, soap, writing paper. Above him, a radio crackles faintly with American swing music, Benny Goodman's clarinet dancing through the air. Several Germans tap their feet without realizing it. Weber unwraps a piece of chocolate. It melts on his tongue, rich, smooth, almost unreal. He hasn't tasted real chocolate since before the invasion of Poland. Keller stares at his own bar and whispers, "My children have never had chocolate." The room falls still. It isn't resentment they feel. Not exactly. It's something heavier, a realization with moral weight. They are fed better as prisoners than their own families are as free citizens. Later in the afternoon, the camp's educational center opens its doors. A handful of German officers stroll inside, curious about the rumors. Rows of books line the walls, English language primers, technical manuals, even volumes of American literature. A young American volunteer, a college student named Henry Lawson, smiles as the Germans enter. "If you're interested in classes," he says, "we've got everything from carpentry to English to agriculture, even some basic engineering courses." Bauman squints at him suspiciously. "Why offer us education?" Lawson shrugs. "Because someday you'll go home. Might as well take something useful with you." The answer is so absurdly simple, it's disarming. Weber leafs through an English textbook, tracing the clean print with his finger. He almost laughs. In Germany, even civilian universities have been gutted by the war. Here, prisoners study freely. As evening settles, Weber sits outside the barracks, watching the sun sink behind the fields. The sky turns gold, then orange, then a deep velvety purple. Fireflies flicker again, drifting lazily through the tall grass. He unrolls his mother's letter once more. He reads the line about hunger again. Then he looks at the full stomach beneath his denim shirt. A hollow ache grows inside him, not from hunger, but from the truth forming with painful clarity. Germany is losing this war, not just on the battlefield, but in the kitchens, the farms, the factories, the very foundations of life itself. He watches American guards laugh together near the gate, healthy, well-fed, confident. Their uniforms are crisp, their boots polished, their faces unlined by winter starvation or worry over bombed homes. Weber whispers into the quiet night, "We were never fighting the America they told us about." The winds of the Iowa plains carry his words away. July 2nd, 1943. Outside Algona, Iowa, Simmons family farm. The sun stands high above the cornfields, pouring golden light across the rolling land. Weber grips the wooden handle of a hoe, loosening soil between neat rows of crops. Sweat trickles down his spine, but the breeze that sweeps across Iowa keeps the heat tolerable. Behind him, cows graze lazily in open pastures. A tractor growls in the distance. It is hard to believe there's a war happening an ocean away. Simmons steps out of the barn, carrying a jug of water, waving the men over. "All right, boys, break time." Weber, Keller, and two others drop their tools and gather near the shade of a cottonwood tree. Simmons hands out tin cups, filling each to the brim. The water is cold enough to sting the teeth. "You fellas work hard," Simmons says with an approving nod. "I've had farm hands who couldn't stay in these fields half as long." Keller chuckles. "In Afrika war es heißer." It was hotter in Africa. Simmons laughs even though he understands only half the words. As they drink, the truck radio, always left on for company, crackles with a news bulletin. The announcer's voice carries across the field, distorted but clear enough. American wheat production expected to break records again this year. Weber almost chokes on his water. Again? Another record? The announcer continues. "Despite millions of men deployed overseas, U.S. agricultural output remains strong. Farm machinery orders are up 7%. Machines, more machines, always more machines. Weber looks out across the field where 3 tractors plow effortlessly through acres that would take a German labor unit days to cover. At home, fuel shortages had forced many farms back to horse-drawn plows. Here, the machines outnumber the horses. Keller whispers, "This is why they feed us so well. They barely feel the strain." Baumann, shading his eyes as he studies the horizon, adds quietly, "If this is just one farm, imagine the whole country." The thought settles heavily. Later, as they load crates of corn into the truck, Simmons pauses beside Weber. "You know, Lucas? Can I call you Lucas?" Weber nods. "My son Mark wrote me last week. Said army rations in Italy are better than what he grew up on." He laughs softly. "That boy's eating steaks in uniform." Weber forces a smile, but the words land like a weight on his chest. American soldiers eat steaks. German civilians boil weeds. As they finish the day's work, Simmons hands each man a paper bag. "Here, take these for the ride back." Inside are fresh biscuits, soft, warm, sprinkled with sugar. Weber hesitates, staring at the gift. A farmer giving pastries to prisoners? In Germany, civilians threw stones at Allied captives. Keller grins. "Ich glaube, ich ziehe nie mehr nach Hause." I think I'll never go home again. They laugh, but there's truth beneath it. That evening, back at camp, the mess hall serves chicken stew thick with vegetables and cornbread, so aromatic that half the barracks line up early. The radio plays softly. Andrew's sisters harmonizing over the clatter of metal trays. Weber eats thoughtfully, spooning stew into his mouth with slow precision. Around him, men talk about the day's work, about Simmons, about the biscuits. Some even joke with the American guards, trading English phrases for German ones. The fear has faded. Suspicion has faded. Something else has replaced it. Understanding. After dinner, Weber walks to the perimeter fence. Beyond it, fireflies glow over the fields like drifting embers. The sky is clear, bright with stars. Baumann approaches, hands in his pockets. "You look troubled again." Weber doesn't turn. "Franz, how did they win North Africa?" "With tanks, with planes." Baumann shrugs. "Rommel fought well, but he couldn't stop their numbers." Weber shakes his head slowly. "No, it wasn't the tanks or the planes. It was this." He gestures toward the distant farms, the tractors, the untouched countryside. "Their food, their machines, their everything." Baumann exhales through his nose. "You're saying it was lost before it began." "We fought a country we didn't understand," Weber whispers. "A country that doesn't run out of bread, even for prisoners." A long silence hangs between them. Finally, Baumann mutters, "If our people could see what we see." Weber finishes the thought for him. They'd know the truth. Germany cannot win. Behind them, the lights of the mess hall glow warmly, a beacon against the darkness. It is a strange thing to realize the war is lost not on the battlefield, but at a dinner table. July 20th, 1943, Camp Algona, Iowa, Recreation Hall. The projector clicks to life with a metallic sputter, throwing a beam of pale light across the dim room. Rows of German POWs settle into wooden benches, waiting to see what the Americans call movie night. The scent of sawdust, worn lumber, and faint machine oil lingers in the air. Weber sits beside Keller and Baumann, arms crossed, expecting propaganda. He braces himself for a lecture, a morale stunt, something meant to humiliate or indoctrinate them. But the first scenes flicker across the screen and everything stops. Black and white images of American farm machines rumble across the projection wall. Not tanks, not bombers, not soldiers. Harvesters, combines, tractors, equipment rolling across endless fields of wheat so vast they could swallow half of Württemberg. The narrator's rich American baritone fills the room, producing enough grain to feed the nation, our troops overseas, and millions more. through the Lend-Lease program. Keller's jaw tightens. Feed millions more. Impossible. But the film shows it. Mountains of grain poured into freight cars, convoys of trucks delivering flour to coastal ports, crates of canned beef loaded onto Liberty ships by the ton. The room goes silent. Even Bauman, always suspicious, leans forward, unable to look away. The narrator continues. Despite the war, American farms hit record production for the third consecutive year. Mechanization continues, fewer workers producing more food than ever before. A murmur ripples through the German ranks. Record production. During a world war? Weber feels his heart hammering. He thinks of his mother's letter, her plea for food, her warnings of ration lines stretching around blocks. He remembers his sister trading clothes for potatoes. This is something fundamentally different. The film shifts to scenes of American factories, conveyor belts, sparks from welders, rows of workers assembling engines with tireless efficiency. Women in coveralls pack artillery shells. Forklifts zip past like clockwork. The narrator says it plainly. American farms feed the world. American factories arm the world. America will not run out. Weber's breath catches. It isn't propaganda. It's proof. When the lights come on, the hall stays eerily quiet. The POWs blink in the sudden brightness, as if waking from a dream or a nightmare. Captain Hartley steps onto the stage, hands clasped behind his back. "Gentlemen," he begins, "many of you asked why the United States treats POWs well. This is why. We can afford to." His voice is calm, not triumphant, not arrogant, simply factual. "We have resources, food, industry, space. We don't ration mercy." The words cut deeper than any insult could have. A German lieutenant in the front row rises abruptly. This cannot be your whole country. You showed the best examples." Hartley shakes his head. "That film wasn't made for POWs. It's a newsreel, shown in theaters across the U.S. The lieutenant sinks back into his seat, stunned. That night, as Weber returns to his barracks, he notices something he's never seen before. More than a dozen Germans sitting outside in the soft summer darkness, staring at the sky, lost in thought. No jokes, no chatter, no card games, just silence. Inside Barracks 12, the mood is heavy. A few men smoke in silence. Others lie awake, staring at the rafters. Bauman sits on his bunk, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. He finally looks up. "Lucas, I served in Poland, in France, in Russia. I saw ruin everywhere. Cities starving, villages burned. We were told Britain and America were the same, that everyone suffers in war." He shakes his head slowly. That film tonight proved everything wrong. Weber nods, his voice barely above a whisper. "We weren't fighting equals. We were fighting a giant with full granaries and endless machines." Keller, lying on his bed beside them, mutters, "A giant who feeds his prisoners better than Germany feeds its children." The barracks falls quiet again. Outside, fireflies drift along the fence. A distant tractor rumbles somewhere beyond the farmland, beyond the camp. An ordinary sound, yet it feels like the pulse of an unstoppable nation. Weber closes his eyes, and the images from the film replay behind his eyelids. Wheat fields stretching to the horizon, factories glowing like steel cathedrals, conveyor belts that never stop. He realizes with a dull ache that victory for Germany was never possible, not after 1942, perhaps not from the very beginning. And the most painful part? No one back home knows it yet.
March 10th, 1945. Camp Algona, Iowa. 2 years later. Snow melts in slow rivulets across the camp yard, carving thin paths through patches of slush and mud. The winter has been harsh, but even the coldest Iowa winds are nothing compared to the frozen hellscape many of these men once fought in along the Volga or in the fields outside Moscow. Weber stands near the fence, watching spring push its way back into the earth. He is leaner now, older in the eyes, but healthier than at any point during his last year of combat. His denim sleeve hangs loosely around his wrist, evidence of meals that have been steady, reliable, almost generous. Inside his pocket is a letter. He has read it at least 20 times. Die Rationen werden schlimmer, Lukas. Wir haben Steckrüben, wenn wir Glück haben. Rations are getting worse, Lukas. We have turnips, if we are lucky. Bomben fallen jede Nacht. Bombs fall every night. Die Nachbarn fliehen nach Süden. Neighbors flee south. The contrast is unbearable. His mother starves. He does not. His home burns. His barracks remains warm, dry, safe. Baumann steps beside him, hands stuffed into his coat pockets. You heard the news? The older man says quietly. Berlin is nearly surrounded. Weber nods. The guards were talking about it at breakfast. Breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, buttered oats, and the ever-present coffee that no German civilian has tasted in years. The kind of meal that would be considered decadent anywhere in Europe, yet here, even prisoners receive it without question. Baumann exhales slowly. When we were captured, I thought captivity was the end of life. But in a way, it was the beginning. Weber doesn't respond. He's thinking about the films they've seen, the newspapers the camp sometimes provides, the photographs of American cities untouched by war, skyscrapers lit at night, department stores overflowing with goods, families smiling beside new automobiles. A country utterly insulated from the destruction Germany unleashed on Europe, a country whose wealth only grew during the war. Lucas, Keller calls from across the yard, waving a newspaper. You need to see this. Weber and Baumann gather around him as he points to a headline. Ruhr encircled. German industry in collapse. Beneath the bold print, the article describes US forces rolling through manufacturing hubs that once powered the Wehrmacht. Essen, Duisburg, Dortmund. Photos show American soldiers walking through twisted steelworks and silent factories. Baumann mutters, ohne Industrie gibt es keine Armee. Without industry, there is no army. Weber doesn't need to read more. He remembers Simmons' farm. He remembers the factory newsreel. He remembers the Red Cross parcels stacked like mountains. He understands. Germany is not merely losing. Germany has been defeated for years. It simply hadn't realized it. April 30th, 1945, Camp Algona. A rumor spreads through the barracks like a gust of wind. Hitler is dead. Some prisoners refuse to believe it. Others accept it with quiet resignation. But Weber feels only numbness. He sits on his bunk, staring at his boots. Not triumph, not sorrow. Only the certainty that everything is ending. Everything he was raised to believe. Everything he fought for. Everything he sacrificed for. Baumann enters slowly and sits beside him. When we go home, the older man says softly, Germany will be gone. Not the land, but the Germany we knew. Weber nods, eyes unfocused. Maybe that is for the best. The two men sit in silence, listening to the spring breeze whisper through the cracks in the barracks walls. May 8, 1945, VE Day. The camp loudspeakers crackle to life. Attention! Germany has formally surrendered. The war in Europe is over. Some prisoners cheer in relief. Some weep for their families. Some stare blankly, unable to grasp what it means. Weber grips the edge of his bunk, feeling his heart race. It is over, truly over. But the Americans do not celebrate with cruelty. There is no mocking, no humiliation. Instead, the mess hall serves a special dinner. Roast turkey, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, and even pie for dessert. An MP approaches the German tables and raises his cup. Peace, he says simply, for all of us. The gesture is small, but it strikes like a hammer. Keller wipes his eyes. Baumann stares at his plate, jaw trembling. Weber feels something inside him finally break open. Not grief, not joy, but a release from the tension of 2 unbearable years. As they eat, he thinks of the moment that changed everything. The first hot meal aboard the Florence Nightingale. The smell of real bread. The shock of tasting abundance in captivity. He sees it clearly now. Before any battle was lost, before any front collapsed, before any surrender was signed, Germany's fate was sealed the moment its soldiers realized their captors ate better than their countrymen. It wasn't the bombs, it wasn't the tanks, it wasn't the generals. It was the dinner table. And as Weber finishes his slice of pie, he understands why so many German POWs would later say, "We learned the truth about America not from guns, but from food." Outside, fireworks crackle in the distance over Algona. The war is over. The hunger is over, at least here. But for the men of the Wehrmacht, the memory of that first hot American meal will remain forever.